Dr. Jonathan Holt will be sharing with us now some of the available technologies for producers. John is an assistant professor and extension swine specialist as well at NC State. He's been with us about 4 years after about 8 years out in the feed industry. So he brought a lot of experience from there. And so he'll be going through some of those available technologies. And then he will also moderate a technology panel with some of our other speakers and some of those that are in the audience that have some of those technologies available. And that panel will be sponsored by Evonik. So I'll turn this over to Dr. Holt. John?
Thank you, Dr. C, and thank you all for attending today and sticking with us a little bit longer. We're almost through it, but it's been a good day, and yeah, it's really set this up well to just talk about the big ideas that are out there, some of the new things that are out there, but what's available today, what's in the marketplace. So if you're looking for some of these options, where can you turn today? And so that's kind of what I'm going to focus on and maybe give you an example of some of those ideas, that are emerging but available today. And I'm not going to say, do they work or do they not? But if you call someone, you can get these things, right? And so we heard a little bit about cough monitors and sound monitors in the barn, and those are already out there. There's a few companies that have them. I'm pretty intrigued by them, even though we haven't used them yet, because I do see a benefit in that a low-cost type of instrument in the barn that can be there all the time. And so probably a little fewer things can go wrong with that sound sensor or the microphone than even some of the cameras, and I'll share those in a minute when we get into those. But where these things originated, right, is some of the coughing in the barns, some of the sounds that the pigs make, vocalizations that the pigs make. Can we detect those since we're not in the barns every day? Brent shared some of these barns we're in an hour or less a day. And so what can we do to have some data collected or something sensing pig behavior or pig sounds when we're not around? And that's why I think they're important. The data behind these show that they're able to pick up respiratory problems before being clinically diagnosed by a veterinarian, something with 2 to 3 days before a veterinarian or a staff person would recognize a cough. These sound monitors are able to pick up changes in pig behavior. So I think that's pretty good. Another area I have seen the sound and cough monitors being used is people attendance in the barn. Okay, so most of us know that when you go into a barn of pigs, you usually get them up. Those pigs make sounds. The movements of the pigs create some noise in the barn. And there's some places that say, hey, I know when that weigh crew showed up. I know when the vaccine crew showed up because the sound monitor was telling me some pigs were moving. Or alternatively, I know that no one showed up that day because I didn't pick up anything on the sound monitor. So some other uses for those that you might not think were why they were created, but it ends up the practical use of them. So kind of interesting there. I've heard this referred to again as well, the Echo device from Swine Tech. Some of you in the room may have used this before, but a monitor that is on the sow prevents crushing by monitoring squeals. So another thing using sound, and then sending a signal. So there's basically a device mounted on the farrowing stall walls that's picking up the sound, and it's a certain frequency of a squeal, a loud noise. It sends a signal that has a device that vibrates on the sow, just a little patch that she's wearing on her side, and that stirs the sow a little bit to force it to get up. Okay, the data on this one showed a 70% reduction in crushing in some of their research trials. So that's really well at doing what it's supposed to do. And another study that reported it was more effective than a person trying to also tap or move that sow themselves. So the device was better than a person. So again, out there, I know some farms using it. I know some farms that have used it, to Brent's point, have used it and gone away from it for whatever reasons, but it's still a device using sound, using some of those other sensing technologies in the barn. Okay, I think the big one in the room, I think the number one question that we get is, can you help us with estrus detection? What's out there? There is one device, I've not seen this in the US. If anybody else has, let me know. But this one, a European company using the behavior monitoring. So this is a camera sensor monitoring the behavior of the sow to predict estrus, but also to predict the time of insemination. Okay, and so what this camera is looking for is a change. The camera is mounted over the head of the sow, and it's looking for changes in their ear movements. And so a little bit on behavior of estrus. Again, sometimes standing heat and ears may go erect. That may be some breed differences in there. So I know from talking to some folks that have seen it in use, maybe not as accurate as they would have liked to see it. But still, I think the idea there is back to that labor idea. And then this one is the one that I think requires the most training on farm and really requires that knowledgeable person. So can we add some technology to help us? And so I think you'll see in a few more of these examples. I agree with Dr. Flowers. We're never going to replace a person in the barn, but can we help that person do their job a little better? And I think that's where a lot of these technologies are at today, not replacing people, but helping them do their job better. And then I think the one that's also really important and out there right now, and we haven't talked about a lot today, is biosecurity. And we've learned a lot through COVID. We've learned a lot through a few major breaks in swine disease lately, but what are we doing to monitor biosecurity and monitor our feed flow? And so there is a group out there with what's called the feed tracker. And this technology, anybody out here ever heard of geofencing? Okay, so I see a few nods, okay. So basically you can set up geofencing or just monitors along certain routes. Roads, driveways, anywhere can be marked with a certain location. And then feed trucks, any trucks that may come in and out of your farm can be equipped with also sensor technologies that let you know when those trucks or vehicles have passed through your geofence, these markers that you've put out there in certain areas. And this particular device also uses it to measure the feed bins. Okay, so feed bin locations helps in this particular with feed tracker, it helps the feed delivery know exactly what bin to go in, right? So I know we've all been there before, right? Did the right feed get in the right bin? And this technology can track those feed deliveries, but can also, depending on what kind of perimeter you want to set up, it can track where that truck has gone previously to entering your farm. And if you want to set it up, you can also track its route back. And I know those things have become more popular lately where, and when we talk about the potential of foreign animal disease outbreaks, tracking where vehicles are going in and out of your property before and after is going to be really important. So this feed tracker obviously set up just for feed, but there is some other groups working on that biosecurity piece of tracking vehicles in and out of your farm. So I think we'll see more and more of that start to come up as we track movement in and out of farms and locations. As a general rule, there's a lot of things out there using image analysis. I heard someone mention facial recognition. That's certainly there. The infrared camera use, I think we'll see more and more as that technology starts to lower in cost. The flare cameras, that infrared cameras you can hook up to your cell phone. Some of those are very inexpensive at this point, where you can go out and monitor temperatures in and out of the barns. So those things are available. One project that we did with some image analysis, looking at potential indicators of welfare on farm, was using image analysis to measure the tear staining on nursery pigs. So if you have dogs, you've probably seen tear stains before on dogs. Pigs also develop those tear staining in a response to stress in certain situations. And so we were measuring the size using a camera and image analysis, all computer operated there, to measure the amount of tear staining on pigs and determine if that was looking at also the ammonia levels in the room, in the different rooms of the of the nursery barn, and then looking at the amount of tear staining versus the stress on the environment there for those pigs. So we're working on results of that trial, but just some examples of the image analysis out there, and I don't think we'll see that go away either. I think we're getting better and better. The cameras keep getting better and less expensive. We're going to see more on the image assessment. So one of our big projects using image assessment was to develop rapid and accurate assessment of pig body weights. And so through a project funded by the Port Checkoff, we did work on developing technology related to image processing to identify weights. Our idea here when this started was to predict market weights of pigs. And we quickly learned that there's some other ideas around where we would like to identify weights of pigs. So, you know, as a nutritionist, I know that usually when we place a group of pigs, if my feed curve is on, I'm pretty good at predicting at least that first cut coming out of the barn. And so there's been some interesting conversations being had on maybe we want to use these the weight assessment devices for cull pigs, small pigs, so more on the other end of the line, and also identifying our replacement gilts and weights at replacement gilts. So I know a question on is it weight or age there came up earlier. So we think we've got some other ideas around when you would want to be assessing the weight of pigs to get an accurate reading rather than just at finishing. So I can share a little bit of data from this. We worked with a number of companies, or at least we thought we were going to work with a number of companies that would have a handheld device to identify the pig weights. And unfortunately, not a lot of them wanted to work with us. I know Brent mentioned OptiScan. You saw it in 2012. I called them in 2019. I called them again last year. They're close, right? They're close. That's what they keep telling us. So the technology is there. The application is not quite there. Okay, so I can say that from every one of these companies, we contacted 6 companies that had a handheld device, and none of them would actually offer us the device to test. So, you know, that's where the handheld cameras are not there, but there's a lot of mounted cameras in the barns that I will say. And so here's, you know, how do we do this today? And the reason why we want technology. And this again is to say, we're not going to replace a person in the barn, but we can help them do their job better. So we were on 2 sites that we went in with our camera and wanted to measure, wanted to predict pig weights at market. And we went in these sites that were using human observation, right? The old eye test of which pigs are ready to go. And that particular group was either measuring those pigs as cull pigs, so they were under 200 pounds. They were measuring them as light, so they were not ready for market. They were over 200, but not ready for market. They were either market weight or they were over market weight, which we would call over 290. Okay, so their window was kind of that 270 to 290 that we called market weight pigs. Okay, and we did this at 2 of their sites where we had a person come in and mark all these pigs as either cull, light, market, or heavy. And then we went in the next day and weighed all those pigs to determine how accurate they were with their marking. And so I know, you know, some days we all have bad days, right? But if we look at their 140 pigs in that first barn that they said were market weight, they were only accurate on 42% of those pigs. They were really good at culls and lights, but they missed on some of their market weight pigs. We had the second site. They were a little bit better, but on 195 pigs that we measured as market weight, they had about 76% of those pigs that they had selected as the market weight pigs. They did a really good job at heavies and they did a really good job at lights, but kind of missing in the middle. And when we think about the sort loss economics, and that's a conversation for another day, there's a lot of money put on the table when you're missing these cuts, right? Because when you take these pigs out to market, that sets up your next market day. And if you're off by a day or two, you know, now you either are heavy or light on your next load. And so, you know, there's a lot of room for improvement here on how we're marketing pigs today. I mentioned that we don't have a lot of handheld devices available, but there are the mounted cameras. We've done a lot with Pig Vision by Asymmetrics, and we appreciate their sponsorship today, and I appreciate their willingness to work on some research trials with us. So that was the camera that we used. Here's kind of an image of their dashboard where we put cameras in every pen that could observe those pigs on an hourly basis, taking images of the pigs, sending that back up to the cloud where they're predicting the weights and then giving us a reading daily on what our average pig weight per pen was in that barn. And so we looked at that accuracy of those pigs over time. So we placed these pigs at about 50 pounds coming out of the nursery, put them right in on the Pig Vision cameras. We didn't tell them what they were when they went in. We didn't tell them the weights, even though they really wanted to know. But we wanted to see what the cameras could do. And so if you see when we first placed those pigs, our accuracy continued to get better over time, and we were out there at around market weight time on those pigs. The cameras were anywhere from 96 to 98% accurate, which I think lines up a little bit with what Brent's seen. And I will add for this, they don't promote this as being used for those small pigs, right? The use of this camera is for market weights, and so we were pushing the limits to put that on top of a 50-pound pig. But you can see by the time they were market weights, we were predicting really well. So a device that's out there, Pig Vision has one that's readily available, iGrow, and I was just contacted here yesterday by another one called Farm C. So there's a number of options out there on these mounted cameras. The question would be, do you need a camera in the barn every day? Do you need it on every pen of pigs? And I think that's one of the next steps in answering some of these questions is how many cameras do I need in a barn to accurately predict those weights that we're after? Mentioned, so here's some of those Pigways, another one, the Woogle device. Those are those handhelds that are out there. You can find them on the internet, but if you can buy them, let me know, because they certainly wouldn't let me test them or buy them when we asked. So I think the technology is there, but the application just isn't quite there. So then one of the last things we did with this project to test some of these technologies, just that human observation versus the Pig Vision cameras. And then we wanted to add another device to that. And so there was another company out of Europe that has a walk across scale. So this is just a flat scale that fits in the alley. The pigs were able to walk across it. It registered a weight as those pigs walked. So you really didn't have any extra movement of pigs. They were coming down the alley anyway. You could walk them across the scale. We determined not to, but maybe, Suzanne will here in the future. You can, if you put RFID tags, the scale also has an RFID reader. So ideally you just run them across and the scale does all the work, grabs the number, grabs the weight, and sends you the data back to your computer. So we looked at those three options in a group of pigs. We stuck with that idea. I kind of liked it of measuring out, was it a cull, light, market, or heavyweight pig? And we kind of used those same examples from the last. And so you can see we had a little bit better. I will say that the person that did our marking of those pigs is at least familiar with the barn and familiar with our pigs, but was not in the barn before they were marking those pigs, so they hadn't fed them or anything like that. We did a little bit better on our human observation side, but for that walk across scale, very accurate at predicting weights overall from all the weight classes, about 98%. Pig Vision back in there, about 96%, which we saw in other tests, and still doing better than a human, right? So again, is there some opportunity to do our job better when using technology? And I think that answer today is yes. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving through just some of my final thoughts on some of these technologies. The weight assessment technologies are more accurate than a human. So, we might have to check our pride some days at the door and admit that the computer can do a little bit better than we can. It would be really great if all these technologies would allow talking amongst themselves, right? So I think that's what I'm seeing the most today is we've got feed tracking devices, we've got weight tracking devices, we've got water tracking, and they're all a separate system that wants to be housed on a separate computer that goes to somebody else's cloud, right? And so if they're not talking to each other in the barn, we're not going to get to that level of the computers making decisions for us. And so I think that's an obstacle that all of those groups have to start working together to help benefit us all. And I know this has been said a couple times too, that the next generation of workers in the swine industry and our employees have always been connected to the internet. They've always had digital technologies in their hands. And so our industry needs to embrace it if we're going to keep moving forward. So with that, I thank you. And at this